is to help with any of the audio or visual needs in this room and to assist the Edina TV crew with any needs they might have related to the broadcast. First of all, if you did not pick up a copy of the agenda and you'd like one, they're outside the glass doors on the small wooden podium to my right. Next, please silence your telephones and other electronic devices. After we get going, if anyone has difficulty hearing, please signal me or another member of the city staff, and we'll provide you with what's called a listen device. That's a device that simply slips over your ear and amplifies what our microphones are picking up. Tonight, you may address the commission. You're allowed 3 minutes of speaking time during public hearings. We ask that you stand at one of the side podiums. That's this one here or this one here. Stand where I am at the document for the record, that will signal the start of your 3 minutes of speaking time, and the green light at your podium will turn on. When you have 30 seconds remaining, the yellow and take your seat. If you decide not to stay for tonight's meeting, that's just fine, though I'm told it's going to be a short one. But if you do leave, just keep in mind that the meeting will remain in progress, so please exit as quickly and as quietly as possible. With that, does anyone have any questions before we begin? All right, thanks a lot for being here and being part of the public process.
All right. Well, welcome everyone to the May 25th, 2022 meeting of the Edina Planning Commission. Tonight, the city is committed to continuing to receive and hear your input on matters. We've been collecting public input through voicemail in our engagement website, bettertogetheredina.org. It is important that you know that all comments that have been submitted have been received and read prior to the start of tonight's meeting. You do not need to submit the same feedback in another way. All feedback is considered equally, regardless of the way in which it was submitted. Tonight, there is one public hearing. Individuals who want to provide testimony remotely for a public hearing can do so by calling 1-800-374-0221 with conference ID 723-1239, and we'll have those numbers up on the screen prior to that public hearing. Everyone is allowed up to 3 minutes to speak. Please give your full name and address. Staff member Liz Olson will let anyone who calls in know if they have gone over 3 minutes. And remember, you do not need to call in or comment live tonight if you've already provided feedback. So please do not provide any information that has already been presented, and just provide testimony if you have new comments or information to bring forward. So with that, I will call tonight's meeting to order, and we will do our roll call.
Commissioner Padilla. Here. Commissioner Miranda.
Here.
Commissioner Smith.
Here.
Commissioner Elkire.
Here.
Commissioner Barbaro.
Here.
Commissioner Hayward.
Here.
Commissioner Strauss.
Here.
Commissioner Olson.
Here.
Commissioner Olson.
Here.
Chair Agnew.
Here. Thank you so much. First on the agenda is the approval of our meeting agenda. If I could get that tonight.
Second.
All right, there was, nope, everything is on there. All right, any changes, updates? All right, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, our meeting agenda has been approved tonight. Next on the agenda is the approval of our meeting minutes from our April 13th, 2022 meeting. Any updates or changes to make from that? I had one update. So it's page 3 of our minutes, and this is under the feedback section for the sketch plan review for St. Peter's Church site. The second to last bullet point says potential for increase in crime, needs to be more community conversations around safety. And that doesn't quite capture the note I was looking to make. I would like that updated to there's an opportunity for community engagement to dispel concerns about individuals with developmental disabilities. So if we could just make that one update. Other than that, I didn't have any.
I make a motion to approve the minutes with Chair Agnew's changes.
Second.
All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the meeting minutes with that one change have been approved. Next, so I know that this has kind of been a trickle, but tonight we have our third and final new Planning Commission member here with us tonight. So Bonnie, I'd like to just welcome you to the Planning Commission and allow you a minute or two to just make an introduction, tell us a little bit about who you are, and we can give you a warm welcome.
Thank you, and I'm delighted to be here and to be part of the commission and to finally be in attendance. So briefly, I moved here in the mid-90s after doing extensive research on which part of the Twin Cities to live in. I moved here from Southern California. My kids went to school here, and I worked as a partner in a firm that had 2 separate locations in Edina. So I come at it from various perspectives. I then did live in Minneapolis for 10 years. I am now back in Edina, and I am in the Coventry near Centennial Lakes.
Thank you so much and welcome.
Thank you.
All right, next on the agenda tonight is our community comment. So we will hear from residents in person who would like to speak about something that is not on tonight's agenda or scheduled for a future public hearing. So you may speak for up to 3 minutes. After giving your full name and address, the green light on your podium will turn on. When you have 30 seconds remaining, the yellow light will turn on, and when you are out of time, the red light will turn on. So with that, I will invite any individuals up who would like to provide community comment tonight. All right, I am not seeing any, so I will close our community comment. Next up is our public hearings. So we have one public hearing, and that is B2207 for 6316 Ewing Street. And tonight we have Assistant Planner Acker who will be giving the presentation. Whenever you're ready, Chris.
Thank you, chairs, members of the Planning Commission. The request is for a front yard setback variance at 6316 Ewing Avenue South. The subject property is located on the west side of Ewing Avenue. It consists of a rambler with an attached 2-car garage. It was built in 1957. This is a photograph of the home as it exists today. There's a door in the center of the home here. They're planning on, this is a survey of the existing conditions and then also the proposed additions that they're planning to add on. They have an addition that they're planning to the back of the home, which does conform to all of our ordinance requirements. And then they are moving the front door to be at the south corner of the front of the house, and that's to be more convenient to the driveway. And they would like to add on 1.5 feet in order to have a little more interior space for the entryway so that they can go directly from the front door back into the kitchen area. And they will also have a front entry porch that's 6 by 10, a little over 10 feet, 60 square feet. You're allowed to have a porch overhang with a couple of columns overlap into the front yard setback area. However, any interior space has to meet the front yard setback requirement that in an existing situation, you'd have to average the neighbors on either side, their front yard setbacks. And in this particular situation, the average works out to be 39.3 feet, which is actually further back than the front face of the existing home. So any new addition to the front of the house would require a variance. They would like to just go out as far as the existing overhang, so it won't be out any further than what is existing in terms of the overhang that's there currently. This is the interior floor plan, and you see that they've moved the doorway down closer to the driveway for better access to the driveway, and having a corridor then back into the kitchen area, and then they have a new dining room addition in back, which does conform to the ordinance requirements. This is the new front elevation, so the doorway moved further to the south with a front entry stoop, overhang with columns, and then the side and rear elevations. This is photographs shown with the existing home and looking down the street with the homes on either side. And then the lower photographs are examples of other similar additions, overhangs with columns that are in the vicinity that are very similar to what they're proposing. This is a rendering as it will look once it's finished, and that rendering in context with the homes on either side. So the question is the proposed variance justified? Will it relieve practical difficulties that prevent a reasonable use? The practical difficulty is that the existing average front yard setback is actually further back. Any improvement requires a variance, even a small point intrusion like this one, which actually is not going out any further than the overhang. Are there existing circumstances that are unique to the property? The existing house is oriented on the lot towards the street with the door centered on the house. The homeowner desires to move the front door south for better access to the driveway and protection from the elements. The front entry overhang with the columns has been a very popular addition because a lot of homes just have a stoop which is unprotected, and this is part of the plan. But in order to have a little bit more space inside, they'd like to come out just 1.5 feet. Will the variance alter the essential character of the neighborhood? Granting the variance will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood. The applicant is hoping to provide that additional interior space for the small interior entryway and covered stoop for protection. And the addition will be a seamless addition to the home, and it will look very similar to the surrounding neighborhood homes, and really will not, it won't change the massing, it won't change the roof line, everything will remain relatively the same. Staff does recommend approval of the 4.6-foot front yard setback variance for the property at 3616 Ewing Avenue South. Based on the findings and subject to the following conditions: the survey date stamped April 22nd, 2022, elevations and building dated the same, and then compliance with the conditions and comments of the environmental engineer's memo. The applicants are here: Charles Lewis, the homeowner, and Benjamin Brown, the architect, are here as well. And we did receive one comment through the Better Together Edina neighborhood site that the neighbor to the south, who lives at 6320 Ewing Avenue South, is in support of the request. And with that, I will stop and answer any questions you may have.
Thank you so much. Yes, please.
Chris, thank you. That east front setback is determined, by average. How many properties do you think determine what that
the homeowners have the choice of either averaging all along the side of the block between intersections or the neighbors on either side. It just so happens that you have the one on the very end to the south that's quite a bit further back. And they're on the end of the block where it curves, and so you end up having a number of different front yard setbacks
Sure.
to
I mean,
contend
that's
with.
pretty typical. But it's depending on how these homes were built, and I mean, they could have been average of 20-foot setbacks, and if that was the average, that would be what the requirement would be, right? I mean,
Correct.
there's nothing magic about, I mean, other than you were saying it's the average of, say, the neighbor on either side, but it's not like it's,
It's not a set
Yeah, correct,
30-foot
right, yeah.
or 20-foot. It's always the average, and there are always situations where one home might be a little closer and some might be a little bit further back. But your perception from the street really, they either appear to line up, or in this situation, because the street curves, it's
Yeah.
really hard to see any difference between the setbacks.
absolutely, yeah. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right. Were there any statements that you'd like to make, or? Oh, I apologize. Please, Commissioner
No worries.
Smith.
So Charles, I'm surprised I've not met you yet. I actually live on that street. So maybe later you could, I could walk down and say hi to you guys. I think from the homes on this street, I really appreciate that question with the average setbacks. Each house is a little bit different in how close it comes to the curb. Mine is a little bit further back. I know my neighbor's is a little bit more forward. And so I could see how, that's a code requirement, but from my perspective, I think this fits. Part of the engineering study, I think, did also look at the back with the shed and how it's close to the utility easement. I know that's not the focus for today, but I would say if you're doing the work, you might want to shift that up too. But overall, I think the design looks really good. I like how it's closer to the garage. You could access it easily. Homes in my area, not many of them have that kind of porch setup. So more homes with that would be more attractive, I think. So I think it's a really good design that you guys are going for.
Thank you. No other questions. We will open up the public hearing then. So those who would like to provide public testimony may do so now. For those wanting to join remotely, please call in to 1-800-374-0221 with conference ID 723-1239. An operator will ask you for your name and street address and put you in a queue to speak after you press star 1. Everyone is allowed up to 3 minutes to speak. Please give your full name and address, and staff member Liz Olson will let anyone who calls in know if they have gone over for 3 minutes. So usually I ask if there's anyone in the room first, but I don't think that there's anyone here to provide public testimony. So with that, I will look to our phone lines and see if we have anyone that has joined the queue.
I hate to disappoint you, but I don't have anyone on the line either. There is a short delay in the broadcast, so I would recommend we wait 1 minute before moving on, just to make sure we're not missing anyone who's trying to dial in. My clock shows that it's 7:16, so I'll come back to you at 7:17 or when I have a caller, whichever is first.
Thank you. And again, we just wait patiently given the delay, so.
I think it's safe for you to move on with the agenda now.
Wonderful, thank you. Can I have a motion to close the public hearing, please?
Second.
All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the public hearing has now closed. So with that, are there any more questions if you have them? Otherwise, I would welcome any comments. Please, Commissioner Alkire.
I'll start off. Thanks for the presentation. I thought I found the staff's description of the practical difficulty persuasive. If I did the math right, the existing structure is already about 3 feet over the setback average, and another 1.5 feet to improve the utility for the owner. And to my eye, anyway, the appearance of the house is fantastic. To me, there was that one bit of feedback from the south, and if there's anybody who is going to be aggrieved by a setback increase, it would be that person, because that's where the addition is, on the south side of the house. And that owner was positive, so all in all, it looks like a perfectly great project to me.
All right, if there are no further comments, I would also take a motion.
A motion to approve the front yard setback variance for 6316 Ewing Avenue South.
Second.
All right, any further discussion? All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, this variance request has been passed. Thank you and best of luck. Next on our agenda tonight is our reports and recommendations. So we have Bill Neuendorf with us tonight for Resolution B2208. Please, Mr. Neuendorf.
Yes, thank you. Good evening. Bill Neuendorf, the City's Economic Development Manager. In your packet tonight, we have Resolution B22-08. And this has to do with the proposed sale of property owned by the Edina Housing and Redevelopment Authority. And this is the property over in the Grandview District, the old public works site. The address is 5146 Eden Avenue. There's a provision in Minnesota law that says when a city or an HRA, in this case, buys or sells land, we need to meet with the Planning Commission first and talk about the comprehensive plan and make sure that the intended purchase or the intended sale complies generally with the land uses, with the future land uses as specified in the comprehensive plan. So as most people know, the city has owned this property for many years. It's been the public works site since 1962. More recently, after that facility relocated to a larger property in the industrial district, there's been a lot of conversation about redeveloping this property. So we've looked at a lot of different examples of how that might happen, but this year I think we're closer than we've ever gotten to actually see something happen. We held a public hearing about a week ago on May 19th to start the public conversation about potentially selling the land. So we have a letter of intent and a draft purchase agreement with United Properties. They're proposing to purchase 1.69 acres of the site to be used as multifamily housing, specifically a housing cooperative, which is a for sale type of product rather than rental apartments, and it would be targeted towards senior buyers of that property. It would be market rate, except that 10% of the units per our policy would be bound to be affordably priced. And the density of the property, I don't have it off the top of my head, but it's about 90 units is where we're aiming. Could be a couple more or a couple less on a 1.7 acre site. So we're well within the limits of the comprehensive plan. The second piece of that property is proposed to be sold to Jester Concepts. They're a local restaurant group based in Minneapolis. The owner actually lives in Edina. They own several successful restaurants throughout the Twin Cities, but none in Edina yet. So they're hoping this is their first one. They also have a letter of intent and a draft contract to purchase about 0.7 acres of the site to build a multi-story restaurant with indoor and outdoor dining and also activities. So A lot of details to be defined, but those are the parameters set by the HRA when we offered the property for sale, and that's what we've been able to secure. The balance of the site would be redeveloped as a public park space or a green open space to benefit the broader community. We've been working through the design to make sure that the restaurant works well with the park. They're well integrated, so that potentially people might go to the restaurant but go to the park first to hang out before they eat, or vice versa. We really want to use that restaurant to help activate the park. So in your packet, there's a few maps that show the current uses, the current zoning, and the current content of the comprehensive plan. And specifically, it's figure 3.12 of the comprehensive plan that identifies that this site should be guided towards a mixed-use type of designation. So as we've considered redevelopment possibility and as we've solicited buyers for it, we've definitely kept that in mind. In my staff report, there is a summary of the table of what mixed-use center means, specifically in the Grandview District. And in that table, it identifies that the primary uses should be retail, or they include several, but they would include retail and multifamily residential. In this case, we're considering restaurant to be the same as a retail type of occupancy. The development character is recommended to be one where it creates new pedestrian and streetscape amenities. Today, there's a curb and a road. There's no sidewalks or nothing like that. So certainly one of the conditions of the sale, they've got to add the sidewalks. They have to make it walkable. We're actually going to widen the road a little bit to make it safer for bicyclists is the intention there. And then the development intensity or density is targeted towards a range between 20 and 100 units per acre, and this would be well within those limits. We do recognize that this is just the first step of many. The conversation tonight is just about the sale. We expect to be back late summer with an updated site plan and talk about zoning, because right now the site is zoned industrial. So we'll have to rezone it to get towards that mixed-use type of classification. So the architects and landscape designers are chomping at the bit to get started, but the potential buyers need a contract before they get their team to work. So as we pursue this redevelopment concept, we would, of course, abide by the comprehensive plan. While we intend to rezone the property to follow the comprehensive plan, we don't expect to ask for any variances or deviations from that comprehensive plan. So in staff's opinion, we do recommend approval of this resolution because we feel it does abide by the comprehensive plan's direction for future land use. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions tonight.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Oh, there's a few. Commissioner Olson, we'll start with you. Hi, thank you for your report. My question is, how come the condos are going to be limited to senior housing? I'm just curious why it wouldn't be open market.
Yeah, great question. So it's not a condominium. It'll be a housing cooperative. So this will be HUD financed using a financing program that specifically is for cooperatives. So it'll be a limited equity type of model so that the second, third, and fourth buyers won't be able to double, triple, and quadruple their investments. They'll grow at a measured pace in the future. That's a condition of the financing. And HUD does put an age restriction when you do that kind of financing.
I have a question. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, sure, please go ahead.
Were you done? Were you finished? Okay, question and a comment. Thank you, Bill, for the presentation. It was great and it was very easy to understand, and I appreciated all the attachments and everything since I'm up at the bottom of the trajectory here. But in doing the math, and did I mention I was the CPA? The site is 3.3 acres, and the plan accounted for just over 3. So does whatever left default to park?
It will default to roads and sidewalks.
Okay.
Yeah. So the current curb line, where the western curb is today, there's just a drop off down the hill. We'll have to fill that in, move the curb over. We want enough room to have a grassy boulevard to plant some trees and enough room for a public sidewalk. So we're going to actually move that whole property line a few feet to the west, and that
counts for the difference in acreage. Thank you.
Commissioner Strauss.
Yes, thanks. Bill, two things. One, it's the last paragraph in the staff report, and I just, for emphasis, is that, the comprehensive plan did in fact envision this sort of usage, and that's what we have. And then when we talk about rezoning, well, that's typical of the results of a comprehensive plan, is that the rezoning areas could be any number of areas will be redone. So this is pretty much to form, right? I mean,
This follows the pattern, and
right. I mean,
there shouldn't be any surprises in this.
Right. I mean, like I said, it's not like we passed the plan and now we're changing the plan. The comp plan envisioned this sort of project, and now the zoning catches up, which is typical for the process. So yeah. And then the other one was, it's really kind of not unrelated, but how's our survey on our pedestrian, the bridge? Are you leading that? There were those three artistic, the artwork.
Sure. I'm happy to respond to that. I wonder if I should do that separately from this topic.
I know it's not.
But we're moving forward on that, if that's helpful.
Good, thank you.
I had a question on, let's say, for example, we were to approve this tonight, we sell the land, and then something falls through, plans fall through, they decide not to move forward. Do they still then own the land and they could do other things with it, or what would happen then?
Yeah, great question. So, yeah, that's part of the fun of doing the real estate contracts, is all those what ifs. So in this case, we have two separate contracts. They were in your packet. They're also on the city's Better Together website. We've anticipated several things that might go wrong. We all hope everything goes right. That's the intention. But we would not close on the sale of the land until two things happen. It gets through zoning, and everybody's happy with how the site's going to work, and then both sites get financed. So the HUD financing can take 12 to 18 months, depending on how fast things move on that range. We're not going to let go of the land until we know that they've got the thing financed and they're going to be able to build it. So that's the first safeguard, is that we hang on to title until they're ready to go. In the event where we would get to that point, sell the land, something goes haywire, and they never build it. We've built into the contracts what's called a reverter, which means the city can buy it back for a slight discount than what we paid it for, than what they paid us for it. So the idea is that, our time and money is worth money. So those the right of reverter. And then something else unique for the restaurant we added is a first right of offer. So if at some point they build the restaurant, they operate the restaurant, and then 5 years later they decide they don't want to operate the restaurant and they put it up for sale, the city gets first dibs to look at it. It's right next to the park. It's an important investment for the community. We'd have first rights to look at that and consider whether or not we would want to buy that to use it for a public purpose. We'd pay market rate, so it's not a big discount or anything, but it does put us in that first position. So those are three different ways we've anticipated in case something goes not according to plan, the city's interest would still be protected.
Thank you very much. Any other questions, please?
One question I had is, because both of them are being sold separately, how is it going to work when you're putting together the different buildings? Like, are they going to have shared parking and have the park? Like, how's that going to work?
Yeah, great idea, or great question. We're working on it. So based on input from this group as well as others, the city council, et cetera, we really want to be efficient in the use of this land. So in other forums I've mentioned, this is actually the 10th concept we've explored for this site. And so we've tried to learn from every one that goes awry. We try to learn from it. So this particular site, it does share a driveway and a parking lot. So the housing, there's an entrance and an exit to the parking lot, and they use each other's. We didn't want two separate parking lots, four separate driveways. We wanted to be more efficient. So there'll be, and actually embedded in the sales contract, there is a requirement for cross-access easements so that the housing is legally obligated to work together with the restaurant. The restaurant is legally obligated to work together with the housing, and both of them are legally obligated to work together with the city. So we also want access to the city parkland. So on the far western edge of the property along the railroad tracks, we're anticipating a 10-foot wide easement so that if we ever have to do any kind of repair work to the park, we can walk on the housing property, we can walk on the restaurant property to get to the park rather than trespassing over the train tracks. So we've added a lot of those types of easements in these agreements, and so far we've been working on this for about 6 months. At this point, we continue to have a really strong working relationship. In fact, both buyers are considering using the same contractor because it's a tight site. And so their thinking is they can actually get cost efficiencies if they have the same company build them. They don't have any contracts. We've got a long ways to go before that. But right now there's a great spirit of cooperation between all the parties, and I think that'll carry through.
Any last questions? Commissioner Smith.
Sure, I have a whole list of questions. I'll try to go through. When in this plan it says affordable price apartments for qualified buyers, I just want to understand that language a little bit more. If that's consistent language that we use to represent affordable housing across any development, or would you say that the pricing of these specific homes might be higher than other affordable price apartments in other parts of the city? Could you just elaborate more on what does that mean in terms of affordable and qualified buyers?
Sure. So this is the first property the HRA has sold for an ownership product like a co-op or condominium. So we haven't done this before. In the past, when the HRA has bought or sold property, it's been for rental units. So how you measure affordability for a rental versus an ownership is different. So the full language will actually be worked out through the zoning entitlements. So I don't have precise language tonight, but that will come with the zoning.
Okay. Can I just keep going? In this plan, I think the Grandview zone had a requirement for a community center, if I'm not mistaken. But in this plan, I don't see that. Any discussions or any different plans that you've looked at, was a community center a part of that? And who's responsible for building that? Is that the developer or is that the city?
Yeah, good question. So that was one of the initial concepts. I might have these not perfectly precise, but I think the community center was concept number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, and number 6 that we studied and explored 6 different ways to design a center that we couldn't afford and didn't satisfy people. So after lengthy discussion, I think we turned the corner on that back in around 2016 or 2017, and we realized that the city council did not have the construction of a community center in their capital plan, nor in the park strategy plan, or the park development strategic plan. And that's when we really transitioned and stepped away from building a community center on the site, and instead decided to build the open space, the outdoor space. As we do design that, we want to have placeholders. Right now, we don't have the budget for a community building or a community shelter, but as we go through that site design for the park, we certainly want to consider what could happen in the future. Is there a future shelter, gazebo, warming house, those types of things will be part of the zoning conversation. But at this point, I think we've exhausted all options to build a community center on the property.
Gotcha. I saw some designs of the restaurant. It seems like an open air concept, right? Where the restaurant property and the park kind of merged together. But the only thing I was concerned with, if we have senior housing and an open air restaurant and there's noise, there's music, would that affect, you think, the residents who live in that senior complex? And was any plans with a restaurant that had like a closed concept, where it's not as open, it's four walls? Did you guys look or even talk through what that impact's going to be?
We did. That's a great question. So a lot of the outdoor activity is really driven by the pandemic, when restaurants realized that they needed outdoor options to survive. For the last many years, outdoor dining has been, it went from a little fad to something that's a must-have for most restaurants. As we worked with the potential buyers, both are well aware of who their neighbors are, and they're well aware that sometimes restaurants make noise. Sometimes they get trash picked up at 7 a.m. Sometimes they get deliveries at 9 a.m. And sometimes they close at 11 o'clock at night, and the worker takes out the trash and slams the car door when they leave. So all those things are possible. But the housing developer is well aware of that, and I don't think bashful about moving forward. They're very excited to move forward on this.
Okay, last question for now. That bridge concept, the bridge going over the railroad tracks, I don't think I've seen that before in Edina. Maybe it exists in other parts of the city. I'm assuming that a lot of the residents there would use that bridge to access the pharmacy and the Jerry's Foods. I'm guessing some of them might have wheelchairs. The bike path might also be connecting to that. Are we thinking about that bridge as being a two-lane bridge? Have you guys gone that far down in the process to just design the bridge in such a way that it could allow for two-way traffic, potentially, where bikers, folks in wheelchairs, and senior citizens could get across without having any kind of issues?
Yeah, great question. So yes, but let me clarify. So it is designed for two-way foot traffic. So the bridge itself will be about 10 feet wide from edge to edge. So certainly there's room for two people to pass, two wheelchairs to pass, two scooters to pass, two bicycles to pass. But we've intentionally not made it wide enough for a car to pass. Back in the early days of the Grandview planning process, one of the ambitions was to put a new road in that area. And as we got into the engineering, we realized that the grades just don't match up. You'd actually have to rebuild the parking structure, the Walgreens, and the office building to fit a road. And we just felt the cost of all that wasn't worth the road. So we scaled it down to a bike and pedestrian trail. So I don't know a good example in town that's that wide. There's the pedestrian bridges that go over the interstates. Highway 100 over by OLG in Southview. There's one. I think that's 8 foot wide. So this one will be a little bit wider, not as high and not as scary.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for all your great questions. Commissioner Miranda, did you have one?
Yeah, thank you. I was not here for the meeting where we discussed this project. But on table 3.6 in your report on the last page, or second page, it talks about, you highlight a number of things that match, which is primary use is retail, multifamily residential. But below that it says vertical mixed use should be encouraged and may be required on larger sites. And this seems like a larger site to me. And this doesn't seem to be a mixed use. None of these projects seem to be mixed use, right? Is that correct?
Not vertically stacked mixed uses. Yeah.
Okay. So is this really meeting, okay, that was my question. Thank you.
Yeah. If I could respond to that. So we did explore a mixed use on the co-op corner. I think that may have been concepts number 1 through 9 of that. But honestly, with the co-op, HUD won't finance mixed uses. They finance limited equity housing cooperatives. So we've talked about trying to get creative and cram a coffee shop or cafe into that, and that was not well received by HUD. We also early on explored creating a condominium and building the restaurant right next door to the housing. We couldn't figure out a way to design that and still get deliveries to it, trash to it, and a front door to the co-op, and still service the park. That would have meant all the deliveries, loading, trash are on the park. And we decided we've had a group of like park people and a bunch of planners. We decided it'd be better to have the restaurant on the park rather than all the service areas on the park. And so we decided that we should disconnect the two. But I feel we gave it every possible consideration. But the way to get a vertically integrated is to do apartments. And this is one of the few properties that HRA owns. We didn't see a market failure in building new apartments in Edina, but we did see a market failure in building something that you can buy. And the preference was to get a for sale product out there rather than another rental.
Thank you.
Commissioner Padilla.
Yeah, just a couple of quick ones. What does HUD consider senior? Do you know, 55, 62, 65?
They have two different programs. One is 55 plus and one is 62 plus. I think this is aimed at 62 plus.
Okay. And do we know if Jester and UP have worked together before?
They have not worked together before.
And any idea, any input from the neighbors in terms of either pushback or encouragement?
I think it's early for that. That's a great question. Let me think about that. So we came to this group with a sketch plan meeting early on in January. Was that the neighborhood meeting as well? We did reach out to the neighbors at some point.
Yeah, and the plans were posted on the website. I don't believe we received any feedback that I can recall. But as part of the land use request, the rezoning, the site plan review, that's when the public input will come.
Yeah, we actually did have one. All the dates get jostled. I apologize for that. We had a live meeting scheduled that then got transitioned to hybrid as Omicron really started to grow in December. It was online. We invited the residents within whatever the boundary is, I think 1,000 feet, and also the neighboring businesses to show the plans to them. And they asked many of the same questions that you've been asking me. It's too early to get true voices of support or true voices of opposition. But as we go through the zoning, we'll have to revise the plans and get the details worked out. Then we'll have another round of public input.
Thanks. Thank you.
Commissioner Alkire, did you have? Okay. Please go ahead.
Yeah, Bill, to sort of emphasize or amplify on that part, I mean, you repeated, mention of the 10 versions. A lot of people for over 10 years have checked in and have been involved in this project. So it's probably the site that has been most explored and people are aware of. So, I mean, like I said, you think it's early for some of that public engagement, but the public has been engaged talking about this site for 10 years, even just my experience.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of people that have a lot of history, with this.
And this use, if I could respond to that, the HRA used the past public input to decide on these 3 uses for the site. So it wasn't in a vacuum, but we've got files, we have file drawers full of comment cards and suggestions and things like that. So all that we didn't want to discard all that input. We wanted to learn from it, and that's where we are today.
All right. Seeing no more questions, I would entertain a motion or comments.
Yeah, that number, I guess.
I'd like to have some comments first, if that's okay.
Yes.
Yeah, as I brought up, this is, I wasn't here for the commission meeting where this project was described. But I read about it, and this is, I know we've been working on this as a city for 10 years, plus, and it's been a very controversial site, and there's not a lot of agreement, and there's been everything from a 11-story tower proposed to something like this. And, a lot of people will argue that, perfection is the enemy of the good. Is that how that works? But I think, when it says right here that vertical mixed use should be encouraged, may be required on larger sites, and this is like the key site in the entire district. And so, to my mind, without being vertically mixed use, this site is kind of a no-go for me. So I just think that our nodes are so small in the city, other than Southdale and the Cahill district, which we're studying now. They're so tiny, they're like 2 or 3 blocks by 2 or 3 blocks. And so every site's important, and especially a site that's so centrally located like this one. And the thing is, it's actually in the city's ownership. And so if there's anything that can be done, it would be here. And while I appreciate the need for housing that's owned as opposed to housing that's rented, I don't think such a key central location is the place to do that if it means not making it vertically mixed use. So I'm going to vote against this because I think these projects are classic suburban separated uses, horizontal mixed use, which isn't really mixed use at all. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Miranda. Other comments I will welcome, please.
I've always remembered this site. I moved here in 2012, so I've kind of grown up with this site being empty, and I very much remember that. So I'm kind of glad it's moving forward and being developed into something. I guess as I've served on the commission for a few months now, one thing that's really been guiding our discussion is the comprehensive plan, obviously, but specifically focusing on kind of removing parking where possible. And I know none of this is set in stone yet, but I think this is a really nice area where there's public parking north of Jerry's. There's a parking deck, I believe. So I think this is a rare opportunity, especially with the pedestrian bridge. This is a rare opportunity where you could probably reduce the amount of parking. So if that's possible to be considered in the sketch plan, I think that would be nice.
Thank you.
All right, so I appreciate all these comments. I think we're going to be having these discussions as it moves forward. That's why I still, to get that going, that's why I'm recommending approval of this resolution for the sale of the property.
Second that motion. Okay. Any further? I guess I will make one more comment, and that is, again, that I do think I know that we will be seeing this come to us a couple of more times throughout the process. The resolution that's in front of us today is whether this use of housing, restaurant, and park meets the comprehensive plan. And in my understanding of the comprehensive plan as it's outlined here, Commissioner Miranda, I do obviously note the part about vertical integration, but beyond that one component, I do feel that housing, restaurant, park is in the spirit of what this was meant to be. So as the resolution is in front of us today, I will be supporting it. But I look forward to the continued discussion of where there might be more opportunity to influence what the final output is. So I will do a final look for any additional comments tonight. All right. With that, there is the motion to approve this resolution. We have a second. So with that, I will say all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
All right. With that, I heard one nay, but this was approved. So we have passed the resolution tonight. All right. Thank you for that. Thank you, Bill, Mr. Neuendorf, for coming in. Next on the agenda is our chair and member comments. So any comments tonight? Commissioner Smith, do you have one?
Sure, yes. I don't know, this week is just kind of, last couple of weeks from last meeting to this meeting was kind of rough, I think, in the news, when you kind of see what's happening. First off, my heart goes out to the people of Texas and Uvalde, just senseless and depressing. From my perspective, there's just so much things that are taking our headlines, right? So you have situation in Ukraine, right? You have abortion rights, that whole topic going on, and the politics around it. The elections, of course, the primaries are running, and now the general is in November. So you have all that going on. COVID is going back up. Inflation, so you have all these issues. The reason why I bring it up is, in Edina, we could be easily distracted by everything that's happening. And so we have a really good process here, right? We have a good system. We have a solid city. We have mechanisms for folks in the community to engage us, ask us questions, and for us to give feedback. Everything could always be improved, but there's a good system. So my first comment really is just kind of leverage the process, and it's really just a message for our city and how we can improve the culture here. Just leverage the processes that we have, come to these meetings, voice your concerns, and I'm sure one of the commissions would pick it up and seriously look at it and work through it. The other comment is that on our planning commission, the stuff that we talk about here is so connected to the other commissions, right? I learned about a WooNerf not too long ago, and that's all about a space where people could kind of hang out in the same space, which is really transportation. When developers come with their new building ideas, we try to drive the climate change initiative by asking them questions around that space. That taps into the Energy and Environment Commission work. We talk about affordable housing. That taps into race and equity a little bit. And then even arts and culture, when you talk about building design and aesthetics, something that, we could talk about 6 feet versus 5 feet variance, but how does it look? Does it invite people into that space, right? So the second comment is just about how, as a planning commission and the other commissions, could connect more regularly, maybe like on a quarterly basis, just to share ideas and thoughts about what we're seeing in each other's spaces, right? I might talk to someone in arts and culture that might say, hey, when you guys talk to these developers, think about these kind of designs, or think about art that means something to this community that could be put there, and try to drive that. So just those 2 comments. Leverage the process that we have today, keep Edina strong, and how could we have that cross-pollination of ideas with other commissions, maybe not in a formal way, but maybe in some kind of way where we could learn about what everybody else is actually doing. So that's it.
Thank you for that. Commissioner Miranda, I think I saw something from you too. Did you have something tonight?
Yes. So I want to talk about something that's near and dear to our heart, which is parking, which is sort of part of something that I want to discuss. So, or just comment on, rather. So I'm on the Hennepin County Active Transportation Committee, and we look at projects where the county is redoing county roads and putting in space for active transportation, which is biking, walking, and rolling, as they call it. So something that came before us last week was a project where they're going to repave France Avenue, which is a county road in Edina, the area where it borders Minneapolis and Edina and goes up through St. Louis Park. So from Excelsior Boulevard down to 50th Street, basically. And what they're doing is they're putting in bike lanes. So there's already sidewalks on one side. They're putting in bike lanes. It's just a repaving. And so they're putting in painted bike lanes. But the bike lanes stop at all the intersections. So the area where it's actually most dangerous for cyclists and where cars and cyclists mix is at intersections, and that's where they're removing the bike lanes. So they're going to put in sharrows, which are shared bike lanes. Cars and bikes share the space. So why it's relevant here is that, well, one, it's in Edina, but two, the county engineer said that the reason they did that was because they want to preserve parking on the Edina side, especially at 44th and France. And they said the city of Edina actually told them that that's what they wanted to do. They wanted to save, there's like 5 parking spaces between Sunnyside and 44th Street. And that prevents bike lanes from continuing through. So when we talk about parking, we're working on a off-street parking plan right now for the next year. But I think we need to think about on-street parking also, and what that means for the city and what that means for the plans we have in the city. So I was on the bike and pedestrian plan, and we talked about having that calls for bike lanes on France. I was part of the climate action plan, which was approved by the city council this year, and that calls for reducing vehicle miles traveled. I was on the 44th and France small area plan, and there was a lot of contention on that. Jimmy's not here, but there was a lot of contention on that, but we finally agreed on passing the small area plan when we all agreed that the worst part of 44th and France was how dangerous it was, and that there's no safe way to cross France or to bike or walk along France. So I think it behooves the city leadership to perhaps change how we partition parking and how we prioritize parking. That's something I think we should consider when we talk about parking in our studies. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Miranda. Commissioner Alkire.
Yeah, I just had a quick one, and a small part of my brain thinks I talked about this last time. So if it starts to sound really familiar, just somebody give me a sign and I'll stop. But it was still in my notes from tonight, so I'll go ahead, but watch for somebody telling me that I've lost my mind. In the spirit of what Quincy was just talking about, inter-commission cooperation. There's a group of planning commissioners and transportation commissioners and E&E, energy and environment commissioners, who are working on a tree plan. And Commissioner Miranda and I were in a meeting some 2 months ago, I think it was. And subsequently, a group of us got together with City Manager Neal to talk about some proposals. And where the process is right now is that Energy and Environment Commission has drafted a proposed ordinance around tree protection. I believe the next step, Carrie, I don't know if you have more recent information than I do, but I think we wanted to meet with the city attorney to just get his thoughts on it and then have it run through you for kind of scrubbing up and getting it ready to put before the city council. But basically what the ordinance does is, well, first of all, for those of you who are interested in these kinds of things, it increases the number of protected trees in redevelopment situations by first reducing the size of what is a protected tree, and also removing some of the exclusions. For example, now if you cut down a tree if it's within, I think, 10 feet of where the foundation or a driveway is going to be, it's not a protected tree. You can just cut it down. You don't have to replace it or participate in the buyout for that tree, which is a tremendous number of trees that were covered by that particular exclusion. There's a 150-year-old oak tree on the lot next to my house, which is still there, thank goodness. But the people who bought it a year ago, it was going to be right where their driveway is going to be. And they could have cut it down and there would have been no mitigation whatsoever. So increasing the number of protected trees and also kind of rationalizing or bringing into the 21st century the replacement requirements. Because right now you can cut down, like I say, a 150-year-old oak tree, and if it was protected, you could replace it with I don't remember the exact dimensions, but a tree about this big around. So not that you can ever replace a 150-year-old oak tree, but we're trying to make it a little more sensible from an environmental perspective, recognizing that these trees that have been here for so long are really, even if you own it, if it's on your lot, it is a community asset to a certain extent. So I've been really encouraged to see the progress the group has made. We'll see if we're able to get it in front of the city council and see what their reaction is to it. But I think it's a really important step and a good example, I think, of cross-commission collaboration. And City Manager Neal was optimistic about it, but we'll have to see how the rubber meets the road. So I just want to let everybody know about that.
So will this apply to the city too, city projects, such as Weber Park with all the trees?
I don't know that we've talked about boulevard trees and trying to find ways to increase them. There's a kind of attachment to the, or there's a related piece of the work that has to do with boulevard trees and city property.
So adding, but if the city can't cut down a 150-year-old tree too, I mean, would the regulations apply to all
It's a good
parties?
question. I don't know, Joan.
Okay.
I could find out.
Okay.
I'll follow up.
Anything else you wanted to add, Commissioner Alkire?
Nope, thank you.
All right. Any other comments tonight? All right. Staff comments.
Just a quick one. With one of our work plan items regarding accessory dwelling units, that subcommittee has been working on some ordinances and doing some research, so has staff. So we're going to come together next week in a meeting and probably have something for the commission to take a look at maybe in the next couple of months. That's it for me.
Well, then building off that, you made me remember that we're going to be bringing the parking ordinance back to the city council, and I think that that's now scheduled for July, correct? So that's on the docket as well. All right. I think all that's left is adjournment.
Yep. Sorry. I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? All right, tonight's meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Yeah.
Lou, do you know what's going to be proposed for ADU?